welcome to my talk, Designing with Curiosity. Before I jump into it, I'm just going to let you know that you may hear some noises in the background and it's just my cat playing. She may pop along and say hello at some point, so don't worry about that. Right, so to introduce myself, my name is Billie McMillan and I am a senior user experience designer. Throughout this talk, I will refer to UX and its user experience I'm talking about when I do that. So in terms of my background, I went to Loughborough University, where I studied graphic communication, and I graduated from there in 2014. In 2015, I then moved to Leamington Spa and had my first career role at a company called Impact Innovation. They are a business consultancy and they work with clients like John Lewis, Marie Curie, the NHS, and help them discover their problems and then solve them through improved customer experience. In that role, I rebranded Sega Hardlight, and in 2016 is when I made my transition into games and I joined the studio at Hardlight, which is where I am now as the senior UX designer. So I mentioned this thing of user experience. So what do I do? What is my role in the studio? And I am there to ensure that our players are heard. I'm there to be their voice and making sure that all of our designs are centered around them. So, they're always at the heart of what we're doing with the game. But in terms of why I chose this career path, or kind of how it found me, I suppose, it's easier to understand if we take one step back and look at my college subjects that I did. So I studied psychology, art, and sociology. And I've always had a passion for people, understanding human interaction and what drives us. So in psychology, you look at the human mind, its functions, and how that interacts with behaviour. Art, more often than not, is a visual form of communication, and it's very emotive. It could be the artist imparting their feeling on the audience, the people who are viewing the art, or trying to evoke that feeling in the people viewing. And in sociology, you look at social structures in a functioning human society. A person is not an island, and it's really important to understand how they fit in with everything going on around them. So all of these subjects play a really important role in what I do, and they kind of, they definitely help me. Something that's a little bit out of the ordinary nowadays is that I come from a very large family. In fact, I'm actually one of 7 children. And, this flooded my childhood with a whole host of human interactions. And it showed me time and time again how everyone, even when you're related, you have very different perspectives on the world. And it's so important for all of them to be considered. So in my day-to-day, I am curious. I ask lots of questions. First of all, I want to establish what the problem is. Quite often, what you think you're seeing as a problem, it's actually symptoms of a much deeper problem, and you need to ask loads of questions and you drill right down into that to find the root cause. Once you're happy you found the root cause, you can ask more questions and look from different perspectives. In my place, I'll be looking from the player's perspective, and then build a solution which is right for them. So in all these questions that I ask, the reason I'm asking them is because I want to understand. The more I understand, the better my solution can be. So curiosity, that is why we are here. Curiosity is a desire to know. You're open to discovery when you're curious. And there's no point in asking a question of someone if you aren't prepared for the information you may receive back. Being curious means you need to be open to learning and someone else's perspective. It's an open dialogue between you and your line of inquiry. So that could be getting information through asking questions, as I mentioned a second ago, or it can be through a much more direct means, going and experiencing something yourself or observing from the outside. Children are naturally very curious, and it wanes as we get older, which I think is such a shame. That we may even find that when we get older, we start to bring friction to someone else's curiosity. We have our guard up. We don't like being questioned. We have this base level of knowledge, and we don't want that to be rocked. But I mean, that takes a lot of concentration and energy to open yourself up to curiosity, which quite often can be a blocker. Maybe someone doesn't have the time to answer someone's questions, or doesn't have the time to ask the questions themselves. So I'd like to start us on our journey, taking us right back to the beginning when we were babies. So we come into the world and we know nothing about it. We need to discover it. And this is done through all different senses that we have. So, babies go around, they'll touch everything, they'll feel their way through the world, they'll probably take things apart and never put them back together again. They will also observe what's going on around them and take it in like a sponge. And another thing babies do is they'll put everything in their mouths, pop up a wooden block, put it in your mouth and gather some information that way. As adults, we tend to steer away from this line of inquiry. But with curiosity, it thrives when the person feels safe. So in baby scenario, when their caregiver is in the area, they will feel more open to exploring. They won't be worrying about the external factors of danger or what's going on around them, because they have that trust in their caregiver that they'll be looking out. In adults, we still want to feel safe, but the circumstance may be a bit different. We don't want to be judged. If we're going to ask a question, we don't want to be judged for it. And quite often, that is what will stop people questioning something. So that's the kind of discovering through senses. But of course, there comes a time when children learn to use language. And it's important that, a question doesn't have to be verbal. It can be from, body language. A raise of an eyebrow can be question enough in many scenarios. But when children do discover their language, there is a huge boom in questions. They start asking the WH questions, what, when, where, why, and how. As I'm sure all parents can relate to this, there really is there is that massive boom in questioning. But the big part of this is, up until this point, children have mostly been kind of like discovering on their own. They have to expend that energy and go and touch something, feel it to discover. But now they have an avenue opened up to them, which is they can ask someone else and someone else can give them that knowledge. It's a much more efficient way to get to know what they want to. So it's a really, really exciting time for them. But as we grow older, we gain more experiences, and with those experiences, we pick out bits of knowledge from them. So what happens to that knowledge is we will start to see patterns forming around it and kind of rules. And from that, our brains do something very, very clever, and it will create a shortcut. So in this example, the shortcut is to the alphabet. And when you are learning the alphabet, you will start from the beginning and go all the way through to the end. So if I were to say to someone who's learning what's the last letter of the alphabet, it's likely that they will have to start from A, work their way through until they discover that last letter. But I'm sure for many of you, if I asked you what the last letter of the alphabet is, you will, go straight to your shortcut and you will be able to tell me straight away without having to start from the beginning. And it's, like I say, it's clever. Our brains want to use the path of least resistance. It saves us time and it saves us energy. So previously, where we would have questioned and asked all of these WH questions and been discovering in certain ways, our brain pops up with its shortcut and it saves us time and energy. So your brain's there like, I've got this. I know this. And that feels good, right? It feels really good to know something. But the problem is then when we apply, I know this, so others must too. And this happens subconsciously. It's very easy for us to just automatically assume because you know something, someone else must know it. And automatically assuming someone has the knowledge that you do has a name. And that is called the curse of knowledge. Now, the curse of knowledge is a cognitive bias where you see the world from your perspective. All of the experiences you have paint your view of the world. And, taking the example of my brothers and sisters, even though we're related, we all have very, very different experiences and perspectives. So you really need to take that into account when you're designing something. And it's so hard to think back to a time when you didn't know what you do now. Try stepping back and conjure what it felt like to do something which is now an automatic behaviour. Telling the time, tying shoelaces. I hated learning to tie my shoelaces. I told my mum I'm going to wear Velcro forever. So, and then when we learnt these things, we took the time to learn them, but a lot of energy was spent on doing that. And you were pleased to know I can now tie my shoelaces. But well done for persevering with that one, Mum, because I really did not want to learn. So how do we get over this? We need to avoid assumptions. We need to get to know our user. And of course, at the moment, I'm talking about this in the context of games. So we need to ask questions during development, observe, test, and ask more questions. Hugely, hugely important that we don't stop that questioning and testing process. I'd now like to give you an example of kind of how being curious and stepping out of your own perspective in the game I'm working on kind of came about. So here we have an example of the game Sonic Dash. For those who aren't familiar, the aim of the game is kind of just get as far as you can when you're running along. But in addition to that, there are missions that you can complete, and this is what you can see on the bottom half of the screen here. As you run down the track to the start line, the player has between 2 to 3 seconds to get a reminder of what their missions are. And, we wanted to improve this. It was clear to us that players weren't getting that reminder very effectively. But when we had discussions in the team as to how we could improve this, these are the kind of things that came up. There are lots of text and no time to read it. It doesn't look pretty. It's not in the eye line of the player because it's on the bottom half of the screen. There are too many things to remember. And some missions are complicated to understand. Now, this is it's at these moments when I step in and I take that step back, actually, to be more accurate, and I try and look at the things that we are assuming. And one of the biggest assumptions that we were making with this is that our players can read at all. The only information we're putting across is in text form, so we are assuming that the players can read. And actually a huge chunk of our player base can't read yet, or they're starting to learn to read. So, sentences are just really not what they're used to. So I'm going to kind of pop you into the shoes of our player. And here I've blurred out the text. If we were in person, this is when I would be asking you, how does this make you feel? And I'm sure a lot of you would say that you feel frustrated. There's obviously something there that the game is trying to tell you, but you don't know what it is. How can you work with that? And here is the solution that we've come up with on the right hand side now. There are lots of things that we've changed, but the only thing that I want to talk about is the information that is there for players who cannot read. So again, I'm just going to blur those images. Whereas before it was entirely text-based, now on the right-hand side, we have icons that the player can look at instead. So no, they can't read the text, but they can look at the crab meat and the ring and think, right, okay, if I interact with those on the track, then it should boost this green bar to go up. So I think the most recent quote on curiosity was made this week by Jeff Bezos when he stepped down as CEO of Amazon. And that was, let curiosity be your compass. And this beautifully sums up what I'm trying to impart in this talk. I'm most definitely not telling you to release your knowledge, let go of all those shortcuts, those valuable shortcuts that your brain has built up. I'm not saying that at all, but we need to be aware of them. Take that step back and consider, is this common knowledge? Is this my view on it? Or actually, is this something only I know? I think it's important to highlight that designers can often be viewed as the ideas people who bring a solution straight away, but that just is not the reality. In my eyes, a good designer is bold enough to ask the right questions to uncover the correct solution. And design is an iterative process. It is not an instant one. So, to do this, you will need to step into other people's shoes and see the problem from their perspective, embrace the problem and really, really get to know it, discover the root cause. And from here, you can then start working on that correct solution for the problem. If you aren't curious and you don't drill down into that root cause, all you're going to be doing is finding a solution for a symptom rather than the problem itself. And asking the right questions can be hard. It is not an easy task to do that, especially if we come across this friction from other people, which is why I say that a good designer needs to be bold. So I just want to give you one last quote that I also heard this week, and it is react with curiosity rather than anger. And this was from Simon Sinek. Curiosity is of course crucial in design, but it can also enrich all aspects of our life. We're living in a more polarized world where I am right and you're wrong, but it isn't like that. And why does it have to be like that? Why should my view on the world automatically hold more value than yours? And the internet is a beautiful place, but it's very easy to fall into the cracks of an algorithm. And when you search for something, the results you get back lean towards the type of stuff that you already read, you already know. It's just enforcing the same values than ideas that you currently hold. So let's take that balance back. Vary the way that you experience things, but overall connect with people, and connect with people who don't have the same view as you. You don't have to agree with them, but you can seek to understand them. So let's learn from each other and ask those hard questions. I just want to finish with 3 points. So the first point is to students. Please do not lose your curious spark. Curiosity is precious. And in the workplace, you may end up coming across friction. Someone will have their guard up and think, why is this person asking me questions? But please don't ever let that stop you. Keep your curiosity. And to studios, I say, please create this safe space for curiosity to thrive. Create that bubble where people can really be creative and push the boundaries to find that right solution. But to everyone, I dare you to be curious, just as Simon Sinek was saying. React with curiosity and not anger. I say dare because it's scary to step outside of what you know and question it, and it takes energy and it takes time. But, let's learn from each other. And if we continue to do that, the world will just become a more balanced and better place. So thank you very much for listening to my talk, and I hope you found that useful.